At the very end of Anurag Kashyap's version of Sarat Chandra Chattopadhyay's timeless novel, our titular protagonist Dev emphatically confesses the following to his new lover Chanda.
मैं पारो से प्यार नहीं करता हूँ। मैंने उसे कभी ठीक से देखा ही नहीं। You're right, you know. I am a slut.
Through this intense history of possibly the most enigmatic protagonist in India, for the very first time, a director decides to show Dev come to understand himself instead of finding himself dead to the tunes of a lost love. While Abhay Deol had imagined another dark ending for the character, what makes Anurag Kashyap go with such an unexpected happy ending? Why does our passive, angry alcoholic get another shot at life? And how does this change from the original make Kashyap's version the perfect adaptation all of us writers should learn from? In this video, I'll be diving deep into how Anurag Kashyap's Devdi teaches us how to make adaptations in our own flavor without shamelessly copying the original or missing the entire point altogether. Within his own version, Kashyap also managed to bring out a feminist take on one of the original's most overlooked characters, all the while confessing that he wanted his version of Devdas to discover instead of pity himself. The original Devdas is a story of a mischievous, angry young man who finds himself connected to Paro, a girl from a lower status family. While they initially were determined to get together as adults and marry each other, circumstances and Dev's own indecision leads to him rejecting Paro, as a result of which Paro ends up married to an older man and Dev ends up in a never-ending cycle of self-destruction and alcoholism. While Chandramukhi arrives to the scene to try to help Dev save himself, the story is about how Dev's own cycle of abuse ends up consuming himself. We should first start this analysis by addressing the popular yet terribly aged adaptation of the novel, namely Sanjay Leela Bhansali's Devdas. While the film undoubtedly stood on its own 2 feet by drifting massively away from the original, the problem was that it hollowed out a lot of the nuances in the book. While the original novel features Dev injuring his childhood sweetheart by hitting her above her left brow as if out of some toxic urge for violence, it is later revealed by the writer that Dev himself bears a mark in the same spot. While this idea definitely does not justify Dev's own act of violence, it ends up adding a layer of interpretation within which we realize that Dev wants his lover to resemble him. This adds character to him. On the other hand, Sanjay Leela Bhansali strips off any interpretation to the violent act and ends up simply dramatizing it in a Bollywood song. This ends up being just one of many instances where the adaptation adds nothing to the original and takes away everything from it, simply adding sentimental music on top of scenes to the point of sheer ridicule where the characters find themselves constantly whispering just to sound profound. Novelist Sarat Chandra Chattopadhyay's key style in Devdas lay in how his characters belong to the times he lived in. According to author Srijata Guha, this style comes from Chattopadhyay not giving his characters descriptions as much as he gave them dialogues that felt that they came from living people. This effortless attitude of drawing from real life and situations gives the original novel a realistic depth, something that is clearly missing in Sanjay Leela Bhansali's larger-than-life operatic characters. And on the surface, it seems like Kashyap's version is even farther than Bhansali's, because in aesthetic and milieu, it seems like he has transported these characters into a new world altogether. This Dev is also rebellious, curt, and useless, but instead of being a high-born recluse, he is now a wanderer who connects to the sinful parts of Delhi. This version of Paro still finds herself committed to Dev, but eventually holds her own and finds her way of living her own life. And in the greatest turn away from the novel, this version of Chandramukhi still tries to save Dev, but instead of being a courtesan dancer, she's now a traumatized prostitute with an online past. And yet, upon scratching the surface, one realizes that Devdi still comes out of Chattopadhyay's sensibilities. While Kashyap changes several elements of the mise-en-scène to suit his version of the story, he still keeps the core process of Chattopadhyay's drawing from real life close to him. While Chanda's origin story comes out of a real life TPS MMS scandal, Dev's accidental hit and run case comes out of a real life case in 1999, becoming new ways in which Kashyap breathes new life into the story while at the same time tipping his hat to the original novelist. Another element which is prominent in both the original and Devdi is a clarity in who they are writing for. Back in 1917, Chattopadhyay's appeal to the younger generations becomes a part of the charm with which his story operates. While Sanjay Leela Bhansali tried to mimic these age old traditions and ideas, what ends up is a pseudo historical setting and premise which ends up appealing to no one. On the other hand, Kashyap realizes the appeal of the story to the youth and therefore transforms it for the 21st century young audiences, and therefore the film stands the test of time. A simple scene like the one in which Dev eats up the ticket of an old nagging woman immediately places him at the forefront of a lost young man who finds himself entering a new world that is beyond the world of old judgments and traditions. In naming the film Devdi and not Devdas, it also appears to me that the writers of the film seem to have made another significant shift in the very center of the film. In Bhansali's version, when Dev shifts his loyalties from Paro to Chandramukhi, there isn't much change in the dynamic. Dev remains an alcoholic and continues in his downfall, leading to Chandramukhi giving up on him as well. But in Devdi, the shift in dynamic from Paro to Chanda changes the story altogether. While initially, when Dev was with Paro, the center of the story remained Dev, Chanda made him reconsider his ego and therefore changed the entire anchor point of the story altogether. The film wasn't just about Devdas anymore, as Chandramukhi presented herself as one person who can talk straight with him and give him a befitting reply. By placing Dev, Chanda, and Paro in the deeply sinful underbelly of Delhi, Anurag Kashyap is able to put these age old characters through a modern purgatory of sorts and try to reveal something new about them, try to reveal redeeming characteristics about each of these characters. Perhaps this is the sharpest turn taken by the writers, and it is definitely not without cause, because this time round, Devdas's actions actually carry implications to the world around him. He is no longer the isolated alcoholic he once was, and there are things that lie beyond him. While the original showed Dev as a mirror image to Paro, with similar trials and tribulations, and also inflicting similar wounds to each other, this time round, the mirror tilts towards Chanda, and Dev, upon seeing himself in her, comes to the realization that he is the Devdasi he once looked down upon. For this reason, Devdi makes a strong case for being the greatest book adaptation Bollywood has ever seen. Not only does it understand the core of Chattopadhyay's writing, but also dares to enable a radically new apotheosis in the life of India's most complicated slut.